All right, good evening, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm just going to do a quick test, another one. And thank you for joining us. We might want to give audience members a few minutes to join. But after that, I see that Mayor Wheeler is here and has joined us. And I believe he has a few words he wanted to share at the beginning. So I'm going to invite him to speak if he'd like to. And just see if we have any public attendees here yet. I don't see any of those yet. So maybe if you are joining us, you might want to wait. Right. Well, I say it is 6:02. And we are good to start if everyone else feels the same.
Yes.
Looks like we have four outside public attendees. So and Mayor, let me, you know what? I think I need to unmute you here. Just one moment. Let's see. There we go. And I'll be quiet now. All right. Thank you, Mayor.
How's it going?
I think we might be having a little technical connection there issue. Mayor, you might want to need a minute to test.
Oh,
There you are.
yeah. Can you hear me? Okay, good. Yep. Good to see you. Good to see everybody. You too.
Likewise.
All right, and with that, I think we can start our meeting. And I will just introduce Colleen Miko here, our BCAT director. She's going to open us up.
Well, welcome everybody to our discussion on the cable TV, internet, and broadband related needs and interests within the city of Bremerton. I am the public access manager at BCAT, or Bremerton-Kitsap Access Television. And it's great to have you here. This has been a long process, and we're really interested in sharing these great results with you. And I'm not going to be doing the presenting, but I'd like to introduce Melinda Monroe, who is the contracts administrator with the city of Bremerton, Tom Dushin and Bob Dushin, who are with River Oaks Communications, and Tom Robinson and Christine Rivers, who are with CVG Communications. They'll be doing the presentation tonight, and we hope that if you have questions, you can put those in the chat. If there's a point where you would like to make a comment or would like some clarification, please raise your hand. Melinda and I will be doing our best to follow anything in the chat and to see if your hand is raised so that we can wait for an appropriate time to pause and get your feedback and see if we can answer your questions for you. But with that, I think we'll go right into the presentations. I don't know who is starting this evening.
Colleen, I think the mayor may have a few introductory remarks.
Well, Melinda and Colleen did so well. And I just want to welcome everybody. Thank you to Melinda and Colleen and working with our team, Bob and Tom and their team to produce this study. We've been waiting for it, and it's right on time. Looking forward to it, looking forward to seeing the data, looking at those findings. And as always, I'm anticipating our next steps. So I'll turn it back over to you for the presentation.
Okay. All right. So as you can see my name on the screen, I'm Tom Robinson with CBG Communications. We're one of the team members of the project. You'll hear from Tom and Bob Dushin later from River Oaks Communications. They're the lead consultant on the project. The needs ascertainment, as indicated in the title slide, focused on three things: cable television, internet, and broadband related needs and interest. And there were three major elements to the project. First was the residential community needs and interest assessment. Of course, that was a large part of the focus of the study, is what the residential community in Bremerton needs and their interest as well in cable TV, internet, and broadband, both now and in the future. There were 433 total respondents to a residential community survey that was prepared. 37% of them were Comcast cable subscribers, 63% were not Comcast cable subscribers. And we looked at cable subscribers particularly because the city of Bremerton is currently in the franchise renewal process with Comcast. Okay, next slide. The second major element was a community organizational cable and internet and broadband related needs and interest focus. And to do that, we did have focus groups and interviews. There were also some surveys, which we'll talk about in a second. And there it was set up so that we could focus on different sectors. BCAT, of course, was a critical focus, being the public community educational and governmental access channel for the city, so focusing on hyperlocal programming. So we spent some time with BCAT staff and management, independent and organizational producers, government agencies and organizations, and we looked at their needs, not only for cable and internet and broadband, but also networking needs. And PEG access related needs, public educational and governmental access related needs. Educational organizations, the same. Community and residential organizations really focused back again on cable and broadband and internet access, and the same with business and nonprofit organizations. So really tried to look at those three major focuses, cable, broadband, and internet, from a very wide lens, the residential community and multiple sectors within the organizational community. Okay, next slide. The organizational survey, as I mentioned, it gave representatives from organizations a chance to either augment what they told us in the focus groups to really get some more in-depth information, or it gave those that weren't able to attend the focus groups a chance to weigh in. And we got a lot of additional data from those surveys, again, from the city and other government agencies, educational organizations, business, nonprofit community, and also had some healthcare organizations weigh in on the organizational survey. Okay, next slide, please. The third major element, and really a critical focus of the entire study, was public educational and governmental access. And we'll explain that in more depth as we go through the presentation this evening. But essentially, that's hyperlocal programming. That's programming by, for, and about the city of Bremerton, its residents, its educational entities, and its city government, as well as county government and other regional agencies. What BCAT does, which is the focus of PEG access in Bremerton, the channel that is on the cable system that does provide programming online, and really is centered on these three types of programming: public / community programming, educational, and government related programming. So for that particular part of the study, we did an in-depth documentation review. BCAT sent us a lot of historical information. There were a number of interviews with BCAT staff and allied entities, organizations that use BCAT. Focus discussions, as we mentioned before, a large part of those organizational focus discussions was on the use of BCAT. And then that allowed us to make projections of equipment and facility needs, and you'll hear more about that later. Okay, let me start then into some of the details of the residential survey. One of the things that we were able to do is through the broad outreach, the city, its community partners, our team, the River Oaks team, the organizational representatives, and a number of allied entities did a great job in promoting the survey throughout the city to residents throughout the city of all walks of life, to organizations and all specific entities within all these different sectors. And so one of the things that occurred is that we were able to get a very diverse population responding. So you can see the gender of the respondent, more female than male. The females are slightly higher in the city of Bremerton, so a little higher representation. However, females tend to respond to surveys more than males, at least this type of survey that was conducted. Next slide, please. Race, ethnicity, you'll see that there was a broad and diverse population there as well. In some cases, matching the census pretty well. In other cases, for instance, on other types of demographics, such as age, for example, might skew a little older because we had a high number of cable television subscriber respondents, which we wanted, related to the franchise renewal process. However, cable subscribership tends to skew older these days. Okay, Christine, next slide, please. And there you go, respondents by age. So you'll see that it was a diverse population again. We did have the largest percentage in the 25 to 44, and those mostly were non-subscribers. However, they gave us a tremendous amount of data about if they were cable subscribers in the past, why they were no longer cable subscribers, and certainly on the broadband and internet access side. Income levels, you'll see a wide range again of distributed incomes. Next slide, please. So one of the first things we did after determining the distribution of the population and the diversity of the population is start into the questions specific to cable television services. And you'll see overall level of satisfaction is asked early on in the survey, and that's so we get a kind of a top of the head recall before people can go through all the different types of characteristics of cable that we ask them. So it's really off the top of your head, how satisfied are you with Comcast cable services? So you can see that 42% were satisfied or very satisfied, but that there was a high number of dissatisfied. Christine, next slide, please. The dissatisfied, and you can see it was majorly on a 4-point scale, it was majorly the dissatisfied rather than the very dissatisfied. But together, a pretty high number. The number one reason is cost is too high. And when you dig a little deeper, there's this price value relationship that subscribers are concerned about. We'll talk more about that as we go through. The second reason was poor customer service. The third reason was service and technical problems. And we'll talk a little bit at the very end of this particular part of the discussion about non-subscribers and why they no longer subscribe. Okay. One thing we always look at is how subscribers communicate with the company, whether it's calling, emailing, chatting. There's a lot of different ways of communicating with the company these days. And what we found out is that technical issues drove a lot of the calls. Cable outages or loss of signal was the #1 reason for communicating with Comcast at 59%. Billing questions was #2 at 44%. That runs across surveys these days. There seem to be technical issues and billing questions that are the two largest things that drive calls. One of the things that we found is while there's a number of different ways to communicate with Comcast, a lot still want to get through on the phone, sort of a traditional way of connecting with Comcast or with customer service at Comcast. And that 45% of our respondent population was dissatisfied with the ability to get through to Comcast on the phone. This has a lot to do with automated response units and the different menus that you have to go through to get where you want to go. And that continues to be an issue, not just with Comcast, but with a variety of different service industries. 35% were dissatisfied with the reliability of their cable television service, and this goes back to some of the outage and other types of problems. Okay, next slide, please. One of the things we do is try to find out, all right, well, once you got through to someone and they started to work on your request or your problem, sometimes it's just a service request, a change in service or an ability to have another connection, whatever it might be. And you can see that same day reported, and that's the customer service standards for responding to a service request are either the same day for something like an outage or the next business day for something else. So you can see that a majority of those were responded within that time. However, the concern is that 1/4 of them indicated days later, which is outside of customer service standard requirements. A week later, while very minor, is of some concern, and certainly the 9% about never working on the problem. So you can kind of see, and if you look at the report that we're synopsizing tonight in this presentation, you'll see the depth of detail from the subscriber responses. We asked them in a number of cases to give us more detail on what they were experiencing. And there are pages of written indications that give us a little more depth of what they were experiencing. Communications with subscribers. So again, this time looking at it from other vantage points related to programming changes and rate changes, those kind of things, the ease of use of the automated menu options, the kind of things we were talking about. And you can see there were some substantially high dissatisfaction rates. All these go to, again, customer service issues that can be addressed in franchise renewal and should be addressed. Okay, next slide, please. Back to the technical issues. There were also other types of technical issues besides outages. These are reception problems, have a lot to do with the digital transport of these signals. And you can see that there's problems like digital picture breakup or pixelation, picture freezing, some sound lagging, those kinds of things. And those were issues reported. But again, and of some concern, or even things like sound level consistency within each channel on the system, that is an FCC requirement, that within a channel that the sound stays, going from commercials to regular programming, that the sound stays at a relatively the same level without the subscriber, changing the volume level, that it doesn't go up on its own. So that's an issue, and there are technical and technological mechanisms to keep that from occurring. Again, back to some of the outage issues of some concern was that 5 outages was the average reported. Again, 45% were dissatisfied with the time it took to restore their cable, and that did drive a high call volume. And of course, that's an issue. You can see it sometimes has a cascading effect. Okay, next slide. Available times for installation or service. You can see some higher satisfaction rates with when you got the appointment for arrival time of the technician was at 83%. Available times a little higher dissatisfaction rate, and the ability to complete the request on the first visit a little higher dissatisfaction rate, but overall a better score once the service technician arrives on the scene. Okay, subscriber viewership for PEG channels. So this was another area that we tested, and you can see the interrelationship of how we set up the survey and across also different sectors and organizations. So we looked at public educational and governmental access from a lot of different perspectives, from the subscriber perspective, from the programmer perspective, from the organizational perspective. Okay, let's see. So we asked all subscribers that were, first of all, we asked about awareness of the channel. Are you aware of the channel? And then those that were aware of the channel, and there was pretty high awareness rate, we asked them how often they watched. So when you look at the reports back at daily at 1%, weekly at 16%, monthly at 18%, and then once or twice a year at 39%, and then finally about a quarter that indicate they never watch. When you look at that in comparison to the multi-channel universe, which is substantial at over 300 and some channels, it's a very good response. It shows a significant level of interest in the channel. Most cable channels, even those that are the most watched, generate only about a 2 to 3% average daily viewership. The number goes up, when you ask about weekly viewership, just like this one does for VCAT. So actually having a hyper-local channel compete against commercial channels shows the importance of local programming, that you still get that 1% daily number and that 16% weekly number. And what you find too is that people's interest will be based on the particular type of content. So for instance, some of those that watch government channels only occasionally will watch, or the government programming on VCAT only occasionally, will watch it based on the specific type of subject that might be covered during a government meeting, for instance, like a particular zoning matter that's of high interest to them because it's in their neighborhood. So we find these numbers in comparison to other channels on the system to be very good and show the value of the channel. Okay, next slide, please. So we asked people about picture quality and sound quality and the educational and informational value of the programming. And you can see that the good and excellent numbers came out at, up to 40 to 50% of those that were viewing, fair, higher, and then the poor are very low. So it does show that people do find value in VCAT's programming. However, the picture quality rating was substantially lower than the overall picture quality rating. And this shows us that there's some issues not related to the programming itself or the production of the programming, but related to the delivery of the programming. And that comes in some of the later discussion points. And we'll get to those in just a few minutes. So one of the things we always try to find out is we kind of look at what's happening now, but we want to look at what should VCAT do in the future. And so we ask people to tell us what types of programming we'd like to see more of on the VCAT channel. And we found that Cable subscribers in Bremerton are very similar to subscribers around the country that are interested in hyperlocal programming. Community news is the number one, and this is all across the nation. People are very interested in what's going on in their local community. A lot of times they can see what's going on in the region, from the major broadcast channels, but not necessarily down to their neighborhood, for instance, or even within the city of Bremerton itself. So community news is really important. Public safety information, that there's a heightened interest in public safety these days, and so that will be high. Government meetings, which shows a substantial interest in what's there now and that they would like to see more, and an interest in transparency in government. Public community events and activities, and that's what's going on again out in the neighborhoods. And then local historical programs, which sort of ties you back to the past in Bremerton. So these are very consistent with what you see around the country when you ask. And these are unaided. Basically, the categories are provided and they can check off any that they want or add others. Okay, so a couple of other important things about the responses from cable subscribers. Remember those percentages of viewership when you think back to them, and now this is all subscribers respondents, not just those that were aware of the channel. 78% of all of them indicate that it's at least somewhat important that the local community channel be available to all cable subscribers. So that's of significance, because whether they watch or whether they watch infrequently, they believe that it's very important, 2/3, that the channel be available. And that's because they believe in the value of hyperlocal programming. 63% of respondents believe it's at least somewhat important that a portion of their cable bill, which currently goes to support VCAT, continue to go to support VCAT. And then you'll see later on that we've determined what portion of the cable bill makes sense in light of the needs. So again, that's very important, because that shows a higher importance level than, again, the number of people that watch on a regular basis. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so we always look at non-subscribers. Why don't they subscribe? Well, we had a small number that don't subscribe because cable service wasn't available in their area. So this is another discussion point during franchise renewal to look at, is service available there? If it's not, why not? Can it be provided there? 65% of non-Comcast subscribers do not subscribe because of cost. And that, again, is that price-value relationship. What am I paying for what I'm receiving, especially when you look at that 300-channel universe, 300-plus channel. 69% of non-Comcast subscribers do subscribe to some form of video service, whether it's another cable operator or satellite services or streaming services. So it's not that they're not interested in video. They're just, again, looking at that price-value relationship. Okay. Next slide, please. All right, so that was one focus. I know there's a lot of slides on cable television, but the cable franchise renewal process is a really important process because it establishes the benchmarks for negotiating a franchise that could last another decade. So you want to make sure that you have the data to support the kinds of things that you need to negotiate. So, but broadband, obviously hugely important as well. One of the things we found is that 91% reported having broadband service at home through either Comcast or Wave or CenturyLink. So the big companies out there have most of the broadband subscribers. 5% reported having broadband services through another provider. So at 96%, that does show a substantial number of homes that have broadband service. Now, we define broadband the way the FCC defines broadband. However, that is changing. So that number would go down when you start to look at levels that are up in 100 megabits symmetrical, for example, which is the way the NTIA, National Telecommunications and Information Administration, now wants to look at what broadband will be. Next slide, please. So there are some that don't have broadband. 2% reported not having broadband. And again, cost was number one, and that's an affordability issue. Others did not have access to broadband. They had access to sub-broadband services. And then, so that's of a concern in trying to find a way to get broadband uniformly or ubiquitously throughout the entire city so that it is available. Then you have to look at some of the other adoption characteristics such as affordability, accessibility, and education and training. 2% reported not having internet services available at home, and cost was the #1 reason. That's a substantial issue because there are affordability programs out there that can help with that, and it may be that you know, those households aren't aware of those programs. This was followed by choosing to use their mobile data plan, and that is true for especially those that are having affordability issues with higher capacity systems like wireline broadband service from Comcast or another company, that they'll use their mobile data plan. But those mobile data plans are sometimes capped, and that provides another problem, another adoption issue. So what we've determined is that there is a need for broadband system review related to these issues because it's not ubiquitous, it's not uniform. There are some digital exclusion problems or digital, the need to focus on digital inclusion. And so there is a need for review and expansion of broadband within Bremerton. Okay, next slide, please. We did ask people about their characteristics, if they had broadband and internet. And you can see that people aren't, while they have a certain level of good and excellent ratings, there are some high, fair, and poor ratings for reliability, speed, and especially affordability. Cost is just a huge issue with broadband, as it is with cable. 69% fair or poor on the affordability of their service. And you can see the level of don't knows there was very small. So people have a distinct impression of affordability, reliability, and speed. Okay, next slide. So one of the things we tested was the importance of these things: reliability, accessibility, affordability. And what was really, in some ways, astounding was that these are not just importance ratings at 94%, 92%, and 91%. They're very important ratings. These are of the highest importance, well into the 90s for all three of these. Most residents reported that like $50 a month would be a reasonable price to pay for reliable, fast home broadband services. That was the average. However, certainly there were a number that needed it to be substantially lower than that. And speed of home internet and choice of internet service providers, so competition, is also important to Bremerton residents. Okay, I believe, Christine, if that's the last of the broadband slides, that we're at the end of the discussion of the residential community survey findings. So before we move on to the organizational findings, are there any questions that we can respond to at this time? Melinda, if there's anybody, I'd be happy to hear their question and see if we can respond. You know, if not, we do have a substantial question and answer session at the end.
Any hands? I did just want to note regarding the broadband portion of this presentation that the Washington State Broadband office does have a survey open, and I'd be happy to share a link or information about that following the meeting if anyone's interested in learning more about it.
Okay. Would you like us to go on to the organizational part?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So Tom Dushan, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Tom and Melinda and Colleen and Mayor. I'm Tom Dushin. I'm president of River Oaks Communications Corporation. With me this evening is Bob Dushin, vice president of River Oaks Communications Corporation. We want to talk about organizational needs and interests and some of the key findings that were obtained in the course of this work. This work dates back to about a year ago in October. As has been mentioned this evening, the outreach efforts have been extensive, and there are some recurring themes in the context of the work that has been done. I'd like to share with you some of the participants and some of the attendees who have participated in some of these focus groups. Then we'll go through some of the slides on the needs and interests, and then we will move into some of the key findings. By example, and this is not an all-inclusive list by any means, but attendees of the focus group have included Kitsap Regional Library, Bremerton School District, Olympic College, and many other organizations. The common theme that goes throughout is the importance of BCAT in local programming and the way in which BCAT works with the community. And additionally, from the context of the broadband standpoint, affordability, accessibility, reliability are common themes that are very important to many people, many stakeholders. Community organizations noted that accessibility and education and training are critical to ensure digital inclusion in Bremerton. As you all, or many of you all, are aware, at the federal level, there is a digital equity and inclusion and access program, and it's providing resources to states, and in turn, states will provide resources to local governments to help bridge the digital divide. Community organizations believe it's very important that the city advocate for and help facilitate digital inclusion. We all know that the COVID pandemic, which is still ongoing in different forms, has magnified the need for broadband, for teleeducation, telehealth reasons, jobs, telecommuting. So broadband is absolutely a necessity in today's world for children and adults. Next slide, please. We've spent time talking with governmental organizations. What's come out of that is that local governments need to ensure that residents have availability to affordable and accessible high-capacity broadband services. It's not enough that broadband passes a location or an address. There's training that's involved, there's education that's involved to those particularly with socioeconomic challenges, those with language challenges. And this broadband has to operate at speeds which not only meet FCC criteria, which at one point was 25 down and 3 up, and it is moving towards 100 down and 20 up. But those are baseline numbers to identify unserved and underserved. And the speeds have to address the needs of people and take into account the number of people working from home and loads on the system. Fiber connections are necessary between all community anchor institutions, and they need to be cost effective and enable high capacity communications. We're going to talk a little later on our group regarding the institutional network in Bremerton. And what's happened is the paradigm has really changed given what the FCC has promulgated in some orders as far as responsibility of cable operators and the ways in which local government can meet and exceed the needs of the community. Next slide, please. Educational organizations. I'm going to share a list of to some of those that I've already mentioned. In addition to that, for some more specificity, Olympic College has approximately 4,300 students, and it provides services to the naval base and to the Naval Hospital, Bremerton. Lack of access to broadband continues to be a problem for educational organizations, whether it's K through 12 or Olympic College and others. And again, the affordability issue has come up. Residents need affordable, accessible, and available home broadband services, as I've already stated, to access the educational services. And educational organizations have been and are working very hard to help close the digital gap. Next slide, please. With respect to business and nonprofit organizations, here are some of the participants at focus group, one of the focus groups. They include Community Health, the Museum, Bremerton and Silverdale Chambers of Commerce, which have now merged, Kitsap Reliance, and the Downtown Business Association. Additional organizations such as Peninsula Community Health Services, The Road Ahead, Love Me for Me, West Sound, YFC, and others have participated as well. What are the outcomes of the discussions and participation with these groups? It's a very similar theme, as I mentioned. Broadband is critically important to the business community and to economic development in Bremerton. When businesses are looking to either start a business, add secondary or tertiary locations, expand their workforce, the underlying infrastructure, including broadband, is pivotal, just as our schools, roads, highways, government, etc. And it is very important for the city to work to expand the availability, high capacity, resilient, competitive broadband in Bremerton. Currently, the three of the larger providers of broadband are Comcast, Wave, now known as Astound, and CenturyLink. And there are areas, as was mentioned by Tom, that do not have either cable television or broadband service currently, certain areas. And we're going to talk about those when it comes to next steps as well. Next slide, please. With respect to PEG access, our team has spent a great deal of time working with Melinda and Colleen and the city to identify what the community needs and interests are. We reviewed PEG access documentation. One of our team members spent quite a bit of time interviewing with BCAT, reviewing the current equipment, analyzing the replacement needs of that equipment, and assisting the city to plan for equipment that's needed in the future. As mentioned, we've had focused discussions with educational organizations, government agencies and departments, and community organization representatives. Next slide, please. So what are the key findings from these focus groups, interviews, and surveys? BCAT needs to be provided in high quality HD. As was indicated, picture quality, and there are some audio issues as well. That's a function in some degree to the lines between various locations of BCAT and the interplay between how this works at the government center and how it works at the fairgrounds, and then how it works in terms of getting a signal over to BCAT. It is clear, though, that viewers have an expectation, many viewers have an expectation that their picture quality is going to be in HD. BCAT needs to be available through multiple sources. The more, the better. The more the word is spread that BCAT provides not only information, but opportunities to those that tune into their programming, the better for all. We recognize that BCAT can utilize a higher degree of promotion of their programming and the services it provides to residents and organizations. And in doing so, BCAT has worked and done a tremendous job in terms of its interface and interfacing, I should say, with so many different diverse communities of interest. Community organizations place a great deal of value in BCAT's ability to provide information to the public. Next slide, please. Here are some of the key findings from focus groups with respect to government and educational organizations. It's a very good news scenario in that there is a desire for more coverage of community events by BCAT. We talked with a lot of PEG program producers as a team via their focus group participation, and the variety of programming is extensive. Even with that, people would like to see more. BCAT needs additional program delivery capabilities. From an equipment standpoint, whether it's the amount of space or editing suites, there was a need expressed for more facilities to be made available. Educational organizations saw BCAT providing this important link, which I referred to, between education organizations and the community. And BCAT does help provide a diverse platform for information provision and outreach. That includes shows dealing with arts, dealing with education, shows dealing with a whole host of information. Next slide, please. As far as business and nonprofit organizations are concerned, they do feel that BCAT serves an important role in connecting multiple segments in the community. And that's one thing that's very apparent to us, because when one considers the wide variety of languages that are spoken by residents in Bremerton, the very wide and diverse religious groups that are there, the educational institutions and organizations that benefit troubled youth. And it's just, the list goes on and on. So the needs are there, and we are hopeful and optimistic that the results of these surveys and focus groups and interviews will then be transcended into the work that's going to be done with Comcast in the city, and additionally with broadband providers. Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you now to talk some more about the PEG-related access, community needs, and interests.
Okay, all right, thank you, Tom. We were able to take all this information gathered from the residents, gathered from the organizations, gathered from working with BCAT staff and their independent producers, their organizational users. And these were the major determinations related to our recommendations going forward for franchise negotiations and putting into a franchise agreement in the future. The BCAT channel needs a variety of different things. The channel needs to be provided in high definition. Right now it's in standard definition. Most commercial channels are in high definition. The viewing experience is much better in high definition, and BCAT produces all of their programming in high definition, and you see it online actually in a higher quality than you do on the cable channel. Access to PEG programming should be available on Comcast video on demand system, their VOD system. That is useful for many commercial channels, and a number of PEG channels across the country have access to the cable operator's video on demand platform. It allows for time-shifted viewing of programming, which is the preferred way of viewing programs in many cases in many households at this point. There needs to be the potential for migration to more advanced formats in the future. A lot of programming is being produced in HD 4K. However, because of the high capacity that's needed to transport that programming, it's not yet at the point where it's being disseminated in large measure on cable systems. However, it is online, and we're going to see a migration to HD 4K and other types of advanced formats in the future. BCAT should be able to keep up technologically with that, and that's going to require some support in the equipment side. We'll talk about that in a second, but also on the delivery side, something that Comcast would need to make available as commercial channels migrate to HD 4K. A second BCAT channel is needed. This was requested during the existing franchise agreement, and for a variety of reasons was not fulfilled. This needs to be fulfilled in the renewed franchise going forward. And finally, there needs to be a new fiber optic line constructed and maintained for transport programming from the government center to the fairgrounds where the BCAT facility is. That needs to be implemented. And so we looked at that as kind of some of the major focuses for the cable franchise renewal with Comcast. Next slide, please. To facilitate this type of programming, if you recall from the residential survey, there's a number of needs of cable subscribers for more of certain types of programming. And of course, a view of BCAT now related to the programming that it provides that comes from the organizations as well. So when we looked at it across a planning horizon of 10 years, which would be the typical length of a new cable franchise, we saw the need for new, upgraded, and replacement equipment for BCAT for the variety. And remember, they support 3 forms of access: public/community, educational, and governmental. They support it at their facility. They enable providers to produce programming in the field. They have studio productions at their facility. They have post-production or editing facilities. They support productions at the Bremerton Council chambers. And then there's the playback of the channel and the need for playback of 2 channels in the future, and also playback in high definition. If you look at all that over 10 years, it comes up to $687,180, or around $68,000 a year. And we'll look at that in a couple of different ways. I'd like to invite Colleen to come into the presentation, and she'll talk a little bit about what BCAT does now, how they facilitate the productions, the types of equipment they use, and why this is important going forward. Colleen, do you want to address that?
Yes, hello. Thanks, Tom. I just wanted to say that with regard to BCAT funding, we are necessarily scrappy. I'm proud of what we can accomplish with the funding we have. Just to talk a little bit about our funding, our current level of funding and the way that it's paid to us on a quarterly basis, we tend to have to save over many years to accumulate funds for major systems that are in need of replacement. So commonly, we stretch the use of our equipment beyond the industry standard expected lifespans, which the spreadsheet you guys have put together shows those industry standard expected lifespans. The PEG equipment needs assessment also takes into account technologies that will be ubiquitous in 10 years, as you were mentioning, the HD 4K. Generally, BCAT tends to be playing catch up on this as a financial necessity. And in regard to our operating budget, not just the equipment, which I was just referencing, that our operations funded by the cable franchise fee, ditto again, I'm being really scrappy by necessity. We do amazing work with what we have, but I would really love to be able to address some of the requests that we got through these focus groups of the participants that's reflected in the needs ascertainment. So that's all I wanted to say basically about the funding and the needs that you guys have determined through this survey. Thanks.
Okay, all right, thank you, Colleen. Next slide. And so what does that translate into? You remember we asked subscribers whether they thought it was important to continue to support BCAT, through a portion of their bill. And although the obligation is on the cable operator typically passes through that obligation to subscribers. So you do have to be mindful of what that is. And actually, that $687,000 based on the current levels of subscribership comes out to about 79 cents per subscriber per month. So it's a very small portion of the cable bill. We looked at it over the 10-year planning horizon, and it may need to escalate to 99 cents per subscriber. And that would be based on the potential for continued cord cutting. So the subscribership would drop over time. So somewhere in that 79 cents initially and rising to 99 cents per subscriber. But again, from our perspective and looking at this both locally and nationally, that's a very reasonable portion of the bill over a 10-year time period. Okay, that is the presentation related to all of the findings, conclusions, recommendations, obviously the highlights of all the different things that we determined through the study and the various methodologies that we utilized in this study. The totality of what we found is covered in the report. It is a lengthy report, has lots of charts and graphs, and goes through a lot of the detail behind some of the bullet points that we presented this evening. There's also 2 exhibits which give the full results of the residential survey with all the individual comments made, and there are pages of them when it comes to asking people for additional comments or would they like to provide additional comments. And you'll find them very interesting to read and very supportive of what how they responded, whether they were satisfied or not satisfied. Then also, as Colleen mentioned, there are detailed spreadsheets which provide details on all the functional areas and the equipment that make up that $687,000 over a 10-year period, including the years that we project that funding would be needed for various types of equipment. All right, Tom, I will turn it back to you.
Great, thank you, Tom. Before we move to the questions and answers portion of tonight's presentation, I want to share with you that under federal law, what's called the PEG fee, the fee that Tom refers to with the 79 cents per subscriber per month, going up to 99 cents per subscriber per month. That is to be used and must be used with respect to equipment and for capital purposes. It cannot be used for staffing. It cannot be used for operations, not because we don't want it to, but because federal law is very specific in that if a city uses PEG funding, that is the monthly subscriber fee, and they use it, if they use it for operations, then potentially a cable operator could come back and seek an offset against franchise fees. So it's not where we want it to land, but that is the state of the law. The other point I would mention on this is that the PEG fee is subject to negotiation, in this case with Comcast. And in doing the detailed needs assessment and needs ascertainment study that we've done, we've provided support for the numbers that you have there up on the screen. I will share with you, there are places where Comcast in Washington and elsewhere may be at 25 cents per residential sub per month, at 35 cents, 40 cents. There are other places where it's more than that. This is a very detailed negotiation that takes place with respect to the amount of the actual PEG fee. And oftentimes it is very scrutinized by the cable operator, which is fine. I will share with you as far as where this leads us into next steps. I would like to comment on that briefly. I know that the mayor had asked about those. Next steps are the report. The report that Tom referred to is over 70 pages, about 70 pages in length. It is extremely detailed. And it provides the methodologies that were used, the results. In reading through the open coded answers that go with the report, it's very interesting what people have to say. And it's about 120 pages plus or minus. So there's a lot of information there, and this has been a high-level overview. Next step beyond that report, which has been provided to the city by our team, and that team is comprised of CBG Communications, Inc. Tom and Christine did a lot of work on this. Dick Nielsen was involved as well. Carson Hamlin, who is a video production specialist, was involved in working with us as far as the development of the equipment list and spreadsheets. Dr. Connie Book, who is a PhD, as mentioned, is president of Elon University, and she has been involved in surveys and needs assessment work for many, many years. And River Oaks and CBG have worked extensively with Connie over the years. So there's, along with River Oaks, Bob and myself, there's been a team of people that has put this together. The next actual step will be that once the city has the opportunity to review the report and then ask any questions, the findings of the report then work their way into the draft of the cable franchise that goes to Comcast. The agreement, current franchise agreement with Comcast expires in June of this coming year in 2023. And what we do is that we build upon best practices, not only in the state of Washington and in the Bremerton area and Seattle and Tacoma areas, but communities throughout the United States where we have all been involved in a plethora of negotiations with Comcast and other cable providers, including Charter and TDS, and the list goes on and on. And so then that franchise draft is presented to Comcast along with the needs assessment report to support the positions taken in the franchise draft. The draft itself is typically 50, 60 pages, 70 pages long. And in this case, not only will it include best practices that we all have seen in terms of these franchises we've reviewed, negotiated, drafted, it worked into that are the results of this needs ascertainment study. And what we want to do is to have Comcast meet the needs and interest of the community. We know that Comcast has been a good partner with the community. We know they've been involved in lift zone projects, which are great. And we are very supportive of those. And the way that we present this to Comcast is to say, and someone may be watching from Comcast tonight, or they may watch this recording, is that the city wants to work together with you to implement the findings and to make this as a partnership an even better document going forward as far as the actual franchise is concerned. So it's a combination of the needs assessment report coupled with input from the city, coupled with the drafting of the franchise agreement, and then negotiations with Comcast to reach a mutually acceptable agreement. So that's the overview as far as next steps. At this time, I'd like to ask if there are any questions that we might answer. Melinda, I don't know if you have questions there, but if you do, great. And if not, they're just general questions or specific ones, we'd be glad to answer those as well.
So I'm gonna take a look here at our panelists and our attendees, excuse me. And I don't see any hands yet. I just want to make sure everybody's able to raise your hand. I'll call on you and we can ask some questions. And then if not, I definitely have a few of my own that put out there.
Looks like Jeff has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Melinda, couldn't quite hear you. Am I good to go?
Yes, you should be good to go. Yep, thank you.
There we go, perfect. I'll just say a big thanks for a great presentation and community outreach. Only just got a quick question, which is if I can't remember if the survey asked anything specifically about social media and if residents or businesses had any feedback regarding that.
Christine, Tom?
Oops, sorry. Okay, I had to get my video back on. No, we in the survey itself, we certainly asked people if there were, other forms of communication or what forms of communication, they engaged in related to these different things, but it was more of a, a catch-all question that we caught in comments. But we did talk about social media when it came to the organizations. There were a number of discussion points related to how that was utilized, whether it was, Facebook Live, or whether it was Instagram or TikTok, or, whatever it might be, and how that would integrate. And it always came back to not so much the application, but the platform. Is something that they could easily do, through the internet? Was it something that they were enabled through broadband? So it always came back to kind of what their situation was related to broadband or the internet. Not so much the applications, but the applications would drive how they utilized it. So I think there certainly, social media is huge these days, and everything that you do has to be interconnected with how you function in a social media world. But I think clearly, if you're able to participate in all those things and to be a part of kind of the digital society, and we even had a discussion where that term was used, the digital society, if you have access to the internet and you have education and you know how to use those applications and connect with people. So that's really how social media got sort of intertwined into the study.
Oh, excellent. No, thank you so much. And thanks again for everything here.
Yeah. No. One other thing I might mention too is, and Melinda can speak to this probably the best, we did use social media as an outreach platform for promoting the survey. And that's something that I believe the city does on a regular basis as part of its outreach mechanism.
Regularly. So, yep, that's part of standard life, for the city as well. And actually, on that note, I wanted to say we have a call-in as well. So they can't raise their hand.
Can't hear you.
With that person and see if they would like to ask. See if there's anyone else who would like to ask a question. Raise your hand, or unmute you if you're a caller.
Melinda, we can't hear you.
Right.
Oh, my apologies. Just letting our caller know that they're welcome to ask a question if they have one. And if not, I have another question, and that relates again to broadband. And I mentioned that the Washington State Broadband Office has a survey open. And the reason we, I've been educated in, the reason we included a lot of the broadband speed questions, all of those things, is that there will be some funding opportunities city and for our broadband providers area to maybe make improvements. There's some things going on, that have been issued. You mentioned speed changes. I thought I would just check in with all of you regarding recommended speeds in the area or in the state of Washington, and just kind of what you're seeing in rural areas versus cities as standard, and where you think we might end up, especially as that's a really big comment that we had.
Yeah, why don't I jump in first, Tom, and just say, because we're pretty familiar with what the state broadband office is doing at this point, and of course what they'll be enabled to do once the BEAD money flows down from the NTIA sometime in 2023. And the first thing I'll say is that the data that's been gathered related to broadband and internet from this study will be really helpful in supporting initiatives that the city might want to undertake. And so I think the city is at a point of making some decisions, based on the information that was provided about how best to help facilitate, digital inclusion in the city, since we know from the data gathered that there are some out there that have availability but don't access broadband, and whether it's an affordability issue and maybe they're not aware of the ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program, or whether it's an education and training issue, which it sometimes is. Sometimes it's a device issue. They're very familiar with their smartphone, but maybe not as well plugged in, into the tablet and laptop universe. So there's a number of things out there that there will be funding for. And, I think now you have some information that you could use to go to the broadband office, for example, and look at available grant opportunities and look at those agencies within city government that might benefit by that. And certainly the digital inclusion efforts of the NTIA, which will accelerate in 2023, will also help support that. And that'll come funneling down from the Washington Broadband Office too. So I think we had made a couple of recommendations in there about how kind of to steer some efforts. And one of the things we suggested too, and it came out of the government focus groups as well, was not only, for instance, with Comcast, and I think Tom had mentioned this, not only in your franchising authority role where you're negotiating a new franchise, but also in your partner role where Comcast is a substantial business entity and provider of services within the city, is perhaps developing some partnerships on some of those grant opportunities. You mentioned rural areas, and this applies really to any area that might have some availability issues. And we do have those certain targeted areas within the city where availability might be an issue for whatever reason. But we know that Comcast is partnering with local governments all over the country on going after funds that are being funneled down through the state and the federal government to build broadband. And with broadband, of course, comes cable, and with cable, of course, comes broadband. So, each effort, whether it's the franchising effort on the one hand, or it's the partnership effort on the other hand, to go after broadband grants, comes to the same place. It helps expand broadband, and it helps expand cable. And through cable comes services like BCAP. So you'll see that as some of our recommendations when you dive deeper into the report. And I hope we've accented that enough tonight as well.
Christine, did you have things that you wanted to share?
The only thing I wanted to touch on really was answering that question about the social media and the broadband. One of the trends that Connie and I see over the last 3 years, which was, the communities in the whole United States, whole country got a big kick of the butt on moving technology in a different direction with COVID. And when you look at for example, when you look at, our question that we normally ask is, how do you use the internet? Where do you use the internet? And what do you use to get onto the internet? Those questions are drastically different than they were 4 years ago. And so those data points that we have now are showing trends more towards those areas that will be emphasized in the grant opportunities that are coming down. More people are using the internet for working from home or from doing what we're doing now, which is doing Zooms. Video conferencing is major now in use of the internet. It's almost number 1 or number 2. Whereas prior to the pandemic, you still got things like I use it for email and getting in touch with my friends, doing my banking and things like that. Now you see video streaming, video conferencing, teleworking from home. Telehealth is a big one. And now you see, if you haven't gone to get your renewal packages, video health conferences are covered now under healthcare programs. And so that's a big one, especially for the older group of people that are out there that don't want to take the time to go to the doctor for various reasons. It becomes an issue getting to them through transportation. The other is teleeducation. That is high on the list too, for what people use the internet for. So there's been this big shift in using the internet for entertainment and financing and doing your bills and buying things and selling things. And there's a big shift now towards, no, I need it for work, I need it for education, I need it for my health. And those are the big main things that affect all those pockets of targeted populations, especially those that are disenfranchised, the disabled, the low income, those that have challenges with getting a job and things like that, that they don't have the access, but it's now becoming more critical for them to have that, to even get their, simple needs to be met. So I did want to just touch on that. And like I said, those areas are now speaking to, digital equity and closing the gap between everybody, and just how people are actually looking at and using the internet, not just for buying and selling, but actually for conducting their business. So thank you, Tom.
And this is Bob Dushin of River Oaks. I'd like to make a point to amplify what Christine just said and what Melinda said. And that is, communities across this country have a once in a generational opportunity. The money that's going to come from Washington, D.C., under the BEAD program and the digital equity programs, they're going to flow through to the state broadband office, and then are going to be made available to local governments or to industry providers, are significant. And what this survey and study and focus group and all this work that's gone into this up until this point does for you, it helps you to make your case with the state broadband office as to who is unserved and underserved. Are there affordability problems? Are there reliability problems? Are there accessibility problems? States across this country, at a minimum, are going to get $100 million under the federal BEAD program. Lots of states are going to get hundreds of millions of dollars, and some states are going to get in excess of $1 billion. So now is the time for communities like Bremerton to continue to use what's been done in this study as a building block for making your case with the state to help build out to pockets of unserved and underserved communities of interest. And as Tom Robinson said at the outset, the standard right now is 25 down and 3 up. Tom Dushin mentioned that of River Oaks. That's a pretty meager standard. It's now going to 100 down, 20 up. It's going to go to 100 down and 100 up. And at some point, people are going to say they want a gig in both directions symmetrically. So we would encourage the city and those on this call, this Zoom meeting, to think about what you can do about making your case to the state broadband office. Thank you.
And I would just,
Tom Dushin, back to you.
thank you. And I would add that we've had discussions with a lot of state broadband offices. And there are a lot of interesting findings. With rural areas, tribal communities, more isolated areas, clearly those jump out as far as unserved and underserved. What's very interesting and what some may not realize is that in cities, there are still a lot of unserved and underserved people. I know of one city that, population wise, it's a household name in terms of, but they have a significant underserved and unserved community. And just to amplify, based upon the findings here, cities and counties and private industry and other institutions are going to compete for those state dollars that are flowing down from the IIJA and the BEAD programs and the digital DEA programs. And this is an opportunity for the city to make its case. We've found that there are unserved and underserved constituents in Bremerton. And just because people live in a city of 45,000 plus doesn't mean everyone's got broadband. And it's available and it's accessible and it's affordable. There is significant competition. I know of another state where the city filed a grant application, and what I will share with you, my experience is that states look for shovel-ready projects. They look for network designs, they look for definitions, they look for specificity, they look for not only strategic plans, but business plans. In other words, if a city or a rural area goes to a state and says, we need money, et cetera, there are communities out there that say they need 3 million, 5 million. I know of one area that said they need $41 million to go up a canyon to serve people. So the competition is formidable, but the opportunity, as Bob indicated, this is probably a once in a generational opportunity from a funding standpoint. And the city, the better plan you can put together with more details, and again, use the study as support for that, and say, we're shovel ready, we've thought it through, here's the job, here's how we're going to do it, here's how we're going to get it done. I think that potentially would resonate well, and certainly much better than what I've seen in some communities that frankly are just getting started in some counties outside the state of Washington. Melinda?
Thank you. I said, I think Colleen has her hand up.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to go back to the survey results just briefly and how that relates to the PEG fee that you guys are recommending. I know that I think it was Tom who mentioned the different levels of funding, or the different levels of the PEG fee throughout the state. What is the average PEG fee that we see in the state, and what's the highest PEG fee? Just out of curiosity.
It's interesting because I'll share this with you. In terms of determining a PEG fee, it really comes down to, under federal law, it's up to the local franchising authority, as we have done with you all here, to identify the needs and interests of the community. And then the cable operator is responsible to meet those needs, taking into account the reasonable cost thereof. So what I want to share is that the number on the PEG fee needs, and in this case is very much tied to the specific equipment needs of the city. Equipment that is needed now, equipment to be replaced in the future, equipment that's HD compatible, equipment that someday might be able to go to 4K. So when we talk about these numbers, it really has to be tied into the specific needs of the community. Interestingly enough, I'll share with you that from what I've seen, and this may not necessarily connect all the dots, but there's not a standard PEG fee that cable operators pay. First of all, local governments need to know to ask for it and need to know how to support it, as what's done here. I'll share with you that there are places where if you get above 50 cents a sub per month, there can be differences of opinion from Comcast and other operators. There's situations where people are paying $1 a month, or people are paying 1% of gross revenues, what is important here is that this process has been conducted under what we call the informal cable renewal process under federal law. If a city chooses to really get into what we call the formal process with a cable operator, that is extremely expensive. I mean, it could cost $300,000 to $500,000 and could take a year or 2 years to fight with a cable operator. And I'm not being Comcast specific when I say that. So I want to provide some context for what we're going to share with you. I would say what we've seen in the Washington area, a lot of times 25 cents, 35 cents a month, maybe 40 cents. We have not had pushback from Comcast. When you get up above 50 cents, then it's really a bigger per sub per month is a bigger discussion item. Tom Robinson, would you share? I know what you shared at the outset. Would you go ahead and share what you've seen in Washington? Again, it's not just because, I mean, getting a bigger PEG fee is not necessarily, I would put it this way, it's not necessarily the win. That larger PEG fee has to be tied into the needs of the city and the subscriber base. When you've got a subscriber base of 5,000 or 8,000 subscribers, that's different than spreading the cost over a city that's got 25 or 50,000 subscribers. And that in no way is cutting against what we're looking for in Bremerton. I'm just sharing with you that if you've got a need of $670,000 in a bigger city with more subscribers, it's less per subscriber per month. So I just want to provide that background in terms of it's not necessarily the higher numbers the win, the number needs to correlate. Tom Robinson, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit, Tom. I think it, like you said, it's based on the need, and it's based on the negotiation and what both sides see as the reasonableness of the cost. And it varies substantially, but it really does skew towards a higher PEG fee in smaller communities because there's a smaller number of subscribers and there's certain types of equipment. It's supporting equipment where it's the same cost to build a studio in a small city as it is in a big county, right? Although there might be more of certain types of things in a large area. So for example, in Port Angeles, up the road, I think, trying to get my geography right here. They have Wave broadband, and they have a 1% of gross revenues fee, which right now is over $1 something per sub based on their video services revenues. In a recent Comcast franchise in Snohomish County, I believe it was 43 cents. But between the three companies, Snohomish, the unincorporated county, has nearly 100,000 subscribers. So, there's a lot of more subscribers generating at a smaller fee. So you really have to kind of look at it, community specific. Vancouver, Clark County, which together has a pretty substantial subscriber base. They also support 3 educational channels and 2 government channels, and so they support more than 1 or 2 channels. And they've had $1 per subscriber per sub for 25 years with Comcast and its predecessor TCI. I think it was TCI before that. Anyway, so yeah, it's so I think that's really the key is when you look at and I think Colleen mentioned this before, when you look at what it's been historically versus the need, and so maybe it's been below what the need is. Sometimes it has to jump up so the need can catch up, right? And then it becomes more of a static fee. But I can tell you one thing, all throughout Washington, all throughout the country, through every franchise negotiation I've been involved in, and I've now done them for 20 some years, and starting with, I was a government official for a long time. Some of you know that, in Fairfax County, Virginia. So I've been doing this for 38 years. My first franchise modification was done after the 1984 Cable Act. So I've been at it for a while, but I can tell you that PEG fees have risen, with the need, but infinitesimally smaller than the cost of commercial channels. And so it's still an incredible value. Whatever is ultimately negotiated, with Comcast, to support what we believe and the study shows is a incredibly invaluable resource in BCAT, will be well utilized and well worth it, and subscribers and residents overall in Bremerton will benefit. So that was kind of a long answer to your question, but hopefully
No,
that
thank
helped.
you, Tom. I really appreciate it. You gave me the perspective that I was hoping for there, because we know that the county subscribers pay 35 cents. So, just being able to hear a little bit, yeah, obviously, not all municipalities, the number of subscribers, et cetera, the needs are not all the same, but just having that perspective of variation is helpful. So thank you so much.
Okay, good.
Hey, Colleen, if I could add something, this is Bob Dushin of River Oaks again. Most communities in this country are subject to effective competition. And what people don't realize, that includes the multi-channel video program distributors, i.e. that includes the satellite providers. So if there's effective competition in the community, when you take the cable operators and the satellite providers, the DBS companies, there is no rate regulation. So historically, rates have gone up much higher than CPIs. And like Tom Robinson, we've been at this for over 3 decades, and the cable rates keep going up. And wherever you land on your PEG fee number, I think it's going to be fair to say it's a very small fraction of what you're going to see for a subscriber's total cable bill. That's not even including the internet portion of the bill or the telephone portion of the bill. So I think that needs to be factored into the equation too. Certainly under the Cable Act, the criteria is the cable company has to meet the community's needs and interests, taking into account the cost of meeting those needs and interests. And that's one of the purposes of this study, to document what the projected costs are for PEG capital replacement, so that you will have the equipment you need and the facilities you need to provide and to continue to provide high quality PEG programming to cable subscribers.
I would also add that unlike the PEG fee, franchise fees can be used for any purpose deemed necessary by local government. So to the extent that, and the franchise fee currently is 3.5%, and the norm around the country is 5%. And it is, again, a de minimis part of a cable subscriber's bill. Cable companies pass that through. The money that comes in from franchise fees can be used for operations and staff at organizations like BCAT. It can be used for roads. It can be used for more police. There's not a limitation on what franchise fees can be used for, unlike the per monthly residential per sub fee. So I want to share that with you as well too, because that's an important source of revenue for a city. We also recognize that because of the OTT channels, in part, that the number of cable subscribers historically has been dropping across the United States. There are a lot of places where the question before courts is whether the Hulus, the Amazons, the Netflix, whether cable operators have to pay franchise fees on those. Thus far, one court's come out and said no. Now that could be a function of a particular state franchising law, but the reality is that we'd encourage the city to plan for the fact that the numbers are going down on cable subscribers. It's a reality, so that needs to be taken into account. That's why we recommended as a group the increase in the PEG fee from 79 cents to 99 cents over the course of the life of a new franchise.
Thank you, Tom, for that additional information, and all of you on that PEG fee. I know I've had questions about it, and I just really appreciate it. It's so helpful for our perspective and planning, and just to understand it better. So I hope everybody else here is able to join us in that conversation. And I just wanted to check and see questions? Check in with our phone call listener. Us, if there's any other questions out there.
Melinda, maybe I'll jump in just while Bob and Tom are here and the whole team, Tom and Christine. Has it been your experience when franchise fees are upped that just turns into a direct pass through to the customer?
Yes, that's been our experience, Mayor. I will say with you that I'll share with you that I've worked on agreements where there was no franchise in place. So the fee literally went from 0 to 5% or some sort of stair step approach as possible. Yes, the cable companies do pass that through, and what we've shared with people is that it's interesting because I'll share our experience. There hasn't been a lot of comments or pushback from the local residents. Now, no one wants their bills to go up. We recognize that, but we also recognize that that's, again, small part of the bill. It's a fee for use of the right of way. Federal law has determined it's reasonable, so people have not packed the halls when even when we had no franchise in place, no agreement in place, and then instituted a fee or an increase in a franchise fee, or talked about that as the case may be.
Yeah, no, and absolutely, and that's obvious. It's a recommendation. It's one we'll consider seriously, and there's ways to present it to me. For me personally, we'd like to attach an upgrade in the service, or look for ways that we can help the underserved community catch up. And so as as the gaps increases naturally, and then of course when you add fees, you want to make sure that and we can help the other folks falling behind keep up. That's what I'm hoping some of the funding that's coming down the road with the support digital equity can do for us. And so that's and you're right, the cost of business is up. Right away fees, right away work it does cost money. It does, there are impacts. So no, these are all good, all great considerations.
Mayor, if I could add, the norm is 5% of cable service gross revenues. Yeah. It's very unusual with all the work we've done in all the states to find a city or a county at less than 5% of cable service gross revenues. And that's been historically since 1984, since the Cable Act was first passed. So you may hear some things from constituents. Some people may try and portray this as a tax. It's not a tax. It is a franchise fee. The PEG fee is not a tax. It is a PEG fee. Both of those are historically documented under the Cable Acts of 84 and 92, and then the 96 Telecom Act. So even if there's some noise out there, what we found is, let's say someone's bill goes up from 3.5% to 1.5%. Let's say that
it goes up by 1.5%.
Goes up by 1.5%. Let's say their cable bill is $100. It's going to go up by $1.50 a month.
Right.
So it's not, and there's never a guarantee. However, history has taught us that cable rates don't go down. They're going to go up. And so that number is a very, very small proportion of someone's cable bill. And it's well worth it for the franchise fees. As you said, if you can get more franchise fees and you can use those fees for general fund purposes or to help get services to unserved and underserved, that's a terrific utilization of that additional revenue.
Absolutely. It's an opportunity to leverage what's coming down the road, and as far as those opportunities. So well, and we encourage feedback from citizens, so we'll expect that if we go that route. And then we'll be ready to explain what we'll do with funds as they come in.
Great. Tom Robinson, we'll turn it back over to you for any concluding remarks.
No, I think we've covered it pretty well. I think I was just going to see one more time if Melinda saw any hands raised, so we make sure we got to everybody. I noticed there were a few participants still in the I'm sorry, well, participants, yeah, not on the panelist side.
Yeah, I want to thank all those attendees that are hanging on here with us. I don't see any hands raised, but feel free to raise your hand if any of you have any questions.
I think on the phone number, you probably have to, or maybe not. Okay.
Somebody has
Yeah,
their
I think I
hand
invited
raised.
them, but like we
You
might have
probably
might have
have
answered
to.
their questions. I'm probably
Oh, okay.
fading out here. Sorry about that.
This kind of a late night for everybody here, isn't it? On this-
We've got a lot of time zones covered, Mayor.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Thank you very much for your participation. We very much appreciate it.
And everyone's participation tonight. City council members, thank you very much as well.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, everybody,
Thanks, Tim.
for joining us tonight and all your work. So you will hear more.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Have a good evening.
All right.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.